and listen, we're always chasing consistency.
Sure.
Right. That's the one thing that I was just talking to the folks from the agency that are still there. They asked me. That's the one thing we're all chasing is consistency all the time. That takes a lot of work.
Hey everyone. On this episode, we talk with Fernando Ramos with North South Law. He is an attorney that primarily specializes in estate planning and business law within Florida and Puerto Rico. Fernando has a very interesting and inspiring story in becoming a business owner, so I am excited for you to learn from his journey. Check it out. Hey Fernando, thanks for joining me on our podcast today, man.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks
for inviting me.
Yeah, man. We've been trying to get you on for a little bit here, because I know you're a very busy guy. Finally was able to get your schedule in here. So, Fernando, tell the audience what do you do?
I'm an attorney. People always ask what kind of an attorney. So we're still trying to figure that out. Trying to figure out that identity because we're relatively new in the field. But for the most part, we do estate planning. That's one of our primary areas: real estate and business law. Those are the three primary areas.
Yeah. Yeah, we've used you for a little bit of business law, and we're using you right now for my family in estate planning. So, what's something really cool about your story, though, is that you used to be an FBI agent.
Yes, and let me clarify. I worked for the federal government as a federal law enforcement officer, but not as an FBI agent.
Okay.
So FBI is one particular office amongst probably hundreds of different federal agencies out there. So the agency that I particularly worked for focused on housing.
Okay.
So anything that have to do with housing, the agency is called U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And each federal agency has their own internal affairs. So think of all the federal alphabet agencies out there. They all have an internal investigative branch. I was that for HUD, Housing and Urban Development. So I worked a lot with the Bureau, with the FBI, went through the same training, not the same academy, but the same training. We had the same designation, same weapons that we carried, the same law enforcement authority, just a different branch of the government. And I did that for 23 years.
So this entire time I've been introducing you as an FBI agent because
it's hard to explain.
An agent,
right? Exactly. And sometimes you try to explain it, and people say, "Oh yeah, he's a FBI agent." It doesn't matter what I say.
you just start answering, yeah.
I don't answer yes. I'm like, yes, I was in the government. That's usually my response, and it's a broad response, and it's accurate. I don't say no, I was in FBI, or yes, I was in FBI. I say, yes, I was in the federal government.
So what brought you? Give me kind of a quick understanding of your journey here. You went from, tell us how you got there, and then how you ended up becoming an attorney.
Sure.
At your age.
Well, see, that's the thing. I was actually an attorney way before becoming a federal agent.
I actually didn't know that.
I went to law school and I graduated 1997.
No kidding.
Yes. And then I realized that I wasn't ready to be stuck behind a desk. That's how that was to vision of what an attorney was supposed to do. Sit behind a desk all day for 10, 12 hours a day. So luckily I found the law enforcement side of the house. I met some folks, talked about it, did some research. I have a lot of friends, local Boston cops, and decided that the feds was going to be something I'd look into. And I did. And I worked out 23 years later. Right about my 15th year is when I decided, okay, I need a retirement plan. That's when I took the Florida bar. I was already here. But as far as law school, graduated in 97.
I'm sure that was hard. Graduating in 97, then having to take the Florida bar 23 years later.
20 years later, exactly on the dot, 20 years later. Had a lot of motivation. I knew that finally this is what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wasn't going to be working for some law firm where I was just another minion. I knew I had a vision on how I wanted to do it differently. So that was the motivation, knowing that I had a few more years to go before I was eligible to retire. And, went for it.
Yeah.
Had nothing to lose.
Yeah. So what made you want to go into this type of, what made you want to become this type of attorney, right?
Sure. Well, I saw a lot of things in the 23 years, right? Worked a lot with the criminal side. As an investigator, I worked hand in hand with a lot of prosecutors, a lot of really good prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
Also, during the course of those 23 years, I worked with a lot of defense attorneys. Some good, some, whatever, not so good.
Mm-hmm.
And all types of attorneys in between, program attorneys, agency attorneys, attorneys that work for the city, for the state, you name it. I work with all different types. And after 23 years of working in that world, myself and my partner, who is also an attorney and who is also a former HUD agent as well, just like me, we decided we want to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to focus on working with the community, working away from the government, working for ourselves, but also helping the community in ways that we had control over. So that's what we decided to do.
Mm-hmm. So every attorney seems to kind of say, like, I'm attorney for this in this situation. Like, you get in a car accident, I'm here to defend you. If you need a good defense lawyer, I'm here for you, or something along those lines, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
who would you say is who are you the attorney for?
Yeah, we're the attorney for the person that doesn't like attorneys. That's who the attorney's for,
Okay.
because I understand how difficult it is to sit across from an attorney and feel intimidated
Mm-hmm.
and not understand the language that they're speaking, whether it's an actual foreign language or whether it's just legal jargon. So my partner and I try really hard to be down to earth and explain things in a manner that anyone can explain it. And I think we got that training from the federal government. For example, I can tell you on any given day, I could be interviewing someone who lives in public housing with very little education, or the the president of an organization, or the staff of the government's office, or someone in Congress that I had to do a presentation for. So we developed that ability to speak with any and all, not just one particular group in society. So we felt very comfortable explaining legal matters in a matter that doesn't intimidate folks. So that's what I think our specialty is.
Where do you feel like when I think of estate planning?
Hmm.
When I think of that personally, I think of it's just kind of the normal process. It's not really intimidating. They're helping me understand that it doesn't have to be intimidating. So it makes sense for an estate planning attorney to just to be all right. Let me just get this stuff set up for you and good to go. Where you've kind of explained this to me in the past. Where is it dangerous in certain ways? Where maybe someone's taking advantage of you or something along those lines? Like what do you bring to the table to truly help someone in that
Sure,
situation that'd be
sure.
different from somebody
Well,
else?
again, it goes back to communication, right? When I sit down with someone, we typically have 3 sessions. The first session is kind of like an exploratory. Sit down and let me explain to you what these things are, right?
Mm,
Because a lot of folks have preconceived notions of what they're getting into, and more often than not, they're wrong just because of whatever reason. For example, I explain what a will is versus a living will.
mm-hmm,
All right, well, let's talk terminology at the basic level,
mm-hmm,
what a trust does and what it doesn't do, and all the other important documents that should accompany and supplement those primary documents, which again is the will and the trust. Most folks don't think about that. I get clients that come to me all the time and says, "I need a trust." Okay, why? Why do you need trust? Because somebody told me so.
mm-hmm,
Right, and then we explore that, and so it's always an educational part, that first session. And then I send them off with a survey that kind of uh, probes a little bit more as to what the types of things that they should be considering, who is going to act on their behalf in case they become incapacitated. Sometimes spouses have a difference, and you kind of let them hash that out amongst themselves, and then they come back on the next session, and we confirm those things and we solidify that. Then I get to writing. So it takes a little bit of time to get there,
mm-hmm.
but once the writing is done, it should be an easier process because we've gone through all those challenges, all those questions. We've answered all the questions. We've resolved all those uncertainties before we get to the point of drafting.
Mm. So that's a really good approach that you take in a sense of like, hey, I'm no different than you. I just happen to know
Right.
the legal jargon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really cool that you kind of bring that to the table, because it's true. I do feel like certain attorneys are like, so I'm the smart one in the room and I'm going to help you. By all means, whenever I am in the room, I always know you're smarter than I am. But regardless, you don't give off that vibe.
No. We definitely don't. And that's the thing. I think, coming from that perspective, coming from at least from where I came from, there's no way I could ever have that attitude. The way I grew up, the way I was raised, there's absolutely no way. And
how did you grow up? How were you raised?
well, I grew up in the inner city, very, very difficult place in Boston. It's called Roxbury, Massachusetts. So not too much expected from folks that come out of Roxbury, if you do the research and you know a little bit more about the history up in Massachusetts. So that's always been an important, kind of goalpost for me, is remembering where I'm from and treating everybody with respect. Simple as that. And trying to talk to somebody at an even field. Again, it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, you still treat it the same.
What made you want to become an attorney?
Well, believe it or not, when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be a famous baseball player. That didn't work out, right? But my plan B was, I want to become a federal agent, because I had family that were, and had family that guided me and said, hey, that's a good approach. Get that law degree and make that into a competitive edge over all the other folks wanting to become a federal agent. So that was the game plan that was drawn a long time ago for me.
Yeah, because it was exciting to you.
Yeah, and motivation and discipline. I heard somebody talk about that the other day, the difference between motivation and discipline. So certainly I was motivated, but you have to be disciplined to see it through to the end.
Yeah. A little teaser. That's our next podcast episode. It's with Stephen Hoshak.
That's right.
Although I think he took that quote from somebody else, but he's the one to get it.
But he made it happen.
Yeah. It's true.
He made it happen.
It's true. So, you do a lot of things, as you already said. You're still trying to figure out what attorney you are. What does everything at North South Law provide?
Well, the main areas, right? The highlight areas is obviously the estate planning. We've talked about that. So we really enjoy the educational part of doing estate planning. We've done a lot of outreach, not only locally, we've done it nationally. We've been to several states. We also do it in English and in Spanish. So that's something that I think will continue. We're also in the real estate industry, closing transactions, helping drafting purchase and sales contracts. And I think the desire and interest to work in that is just based on the fact that we worked for HUD for so many years, working at Housing and Urban Development, seeing from a different perspective, but understanding the documents. And also, again, going back to the same thing, educating, explaining these things to folks that, for example, I had a closing yesterday, first-time homebuyers. When you sit down the first time to close on a deal, you're presented with hundreds of pieces of paper and you have no idea what you're signing. So I put myself in that position. It's like, all right, what would I want to know? And what I don't want to feel is being rushed through that ordeal, right? Or a lawyer just stuffing papers in front of you and just sign here, sign here.
Yeah.
So we took our time, and I think they appreciated that. So I always look at it from that perspective.
And you've told me before that you have a deep, passion for helping the Latino community.
Correct.
Because I can't imagine, I cannot imagine trying to go to. It's already like overwhelming, and now going to another country in another language, trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and it's not just about the language; it's just about the basics of not understanding how things operate here.
Sure.
Right. So, talked about estate planning, talked about real estate, but another area is small businesses. We work with small businesses, and the way that kind of evolved was through working for a nonprofit organization called Prospera, which means prosper in English. And basically, Spanish Latino-owned companies go through the nonprofit. They get approved. They get vetted. Once they get approved for legal services, accounting, marketing, and several others. I'm one of the attorneys that provide the legal services. So that's allowed me to help in outreach. Again, I do outreach to the Latino community through Prospera in Jacksonville, Orlando, Miami. I've been all over the state doing that. So really enjoy that as well, seeing the growth. Some of those clients have turned into amazing entrepreneurs now here in the industry, in the area, in the state. So it's great to see that and be a part of
Mm.
it as well.
So, what is the importance of having a good attorney on your side in a relationship with an attorney on multiple
Yeah,
aspects?
I think that's a great question because I tell that to my clients all the time that you need a good team behind you. Not, great, you have a lawyer, but you also need someone that can help you with marketing, someone with
Mm-hmm.
accounting, maybe some
Mm-hmm.
business consulting. So that's what I see as a good team. And I think what the the importance of having a good attorney is just guiding you through certain and staying away from certain pitfalls. I can give you an example. I had a client who's let's say, a serial entrepreneur, and comes to me one day. And again, we're dealing with someone who's a serial entrepreneur, so he's aggressive by nature, very motivated,
Mm-hmm.
but he's also learning English, and he's
Mm-hmm.
from another country and not used to seeing how things work here. So I have all these things, and he's so motivated. He wants to get things going fast, and he's faced with a potential purchase of a franchise. We go through the franchise, and I explain it to him. Just the agreement itself, that right there, just the explanation, having somebody on his team, saved him almost $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Had he signed that agreement
Mm-hmm.
and gone with this approach, he would have lost over $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that alone, just having someone to bounce ideas off,
Mm-hmm.
is worth it right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I think about having a good attorney, it's someone who knows your life, right? So when I think about using you for any kind of business venture I'm doing or my estate planning, like my assets, how to help me in more creative ways and stuff like that. Um, so when it comes to your ideal client and how you want to help them on multiple things, like give me some ideas around that.
Well, I think that someone that you can really rely on is listening, listening to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But I take it a step further. I like to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the questions that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Did you really think this part through? And, what happens if this occurs and so
Mm-hmm.
forth? And I think that's how we ended up helping that gentleman that I mentioned before is, you're excited, you're motivated, you're pumped up, but you're not seeing the whole picture.
Yeah.
Right. And so, certainly don't want to burst anyone's motivation, but I want you to go, like I always say to my clients, I want you to go in with your eyes open, fully open, not half open, not just focused on the shiny things, but all the things that can also occur. So, being able to ask those questions. And I think, again, going back to the government, I learned a lot about interviewing folks.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call them interrogations. I call them interviews. But nevertheless, I did a lot of listening.
Mm-hmm.
Can't learn much when you're talking,
Mm-hmm.
at least in my opinion. So I did a lot of listening, and then listening prompts to ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
probing questions that'll make you think a little bit more about, all right, what direction do I really want to take this business in or this project, and that maybe you hadn't thought about before. So we are doing some legal work. We're doing a little bit of therapy. We're listening. We're having a conversation. Maybe giving some business advice. It's a little bit of everything.
Now you mentioned that because you saw some things in HUD and stuff like that,
Yeah.
being working, and one of the reasons why you wanted to bring title services to your firm. What are some things you saw that you can slightly touch on that like things you saw and what motivated you to start doing those things? Like I know that you saw some things. You mentioned negative things happening, but what kind of negative things are you talking about?
Absolutely. I'll give you one example. So I was in Boston during Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
I was a relatively new agent. Believe it or not, I actually did a lot of undercover work in Boston, public corruption cases. Hurricane Katrina hits, I get transferred to New Orleans. Boston kid to New Orleans, that was tough. Just the
Mm-hmm.
language alone.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand the English that was spoken in New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to call it that. English. The accent, my accent, the New Orleans accent, that was a challenge in and of itself. But aside from that, just the fraud, the amount of fraud, the amount of victimization that I saw, everyone looking for a way to get over on somebody else, whether it was contractors, politicians, homeowners, you name it. There were fraudsters and there were victims on both sides. So just seeing all of that and wanting to at least help the consumer to the best of my ability to avoid certain things that I've seen, certain things that I've helped prosecute, certain things that continuously occur to victims. Anytime there's a storm, there's going to be some victimization, there's going to be some fraud, but at other levels too. So just seeing all of that and trying to ensure that at least the clients that I work with, they're not being taken advantage to that ability, or that they again understand what they're getting into with their eyes open. And then they can make an educated decision on whether they want to buy that franchise or start that partnership or sign that roofing company to a contract so they can get some work done. So I just want them to have the best, of, the, what's the word I'm looking for? The majority of all of the intel that you need in order to make that decision, make that wise decision.
So, being an attorney with your own practice, also turned into business owner. What education did you get in business owning?
Wow, this is better than any MBA that I could ever get from any school. Just going through the motions, right? Just understanding what it means. I mean, I was talking to a current agent who's still in the agency, and he asked me how it's going on the retired side, and I said, well, it's a difference between a house cat and an alley cat, right? When you're a house cat, you don't have to worry about your next meal. When you're an alley cat, you're hustling, you're working out there, you're working strong hours, you're trying to run the business, you're trying to manage the business, which are two different things, and you're trying to serve your clients. So all of that put together, it's a quick way to learn on how to be a successful businessman. And I think the longevity speaks for itself, whether it's going to work out for you or not, because it's not easy. That's something we've learned. Certainly not easy, but we wouldn't want it any other way.
What have you learned? What do you think your biggest lesson?
Hard work. Hard work. I thought I worked hard in the government, and which I did. I promoted really quickly, and I retired as a special agent in charge, and that doesn't happen by accident. But I can tell you that it was a different gear. I also learned that you can't do things by yourself. Having people around you, like-minded individuals, that's a great way to get motivated. And you learn. You have to constantly have an open mind and learning from others, and you never know where that source of education is going to come from. It could be a client, it could be a colleague, it could be networking groups such as BNI, it could be anything. So just having that open mind and willing to absorb and be a sponge and absorb as much as you can.
Yeah. Speaking of BNI, what do you like about BNI?
Exactly what I just said. The ability to network and learn from others.
Yeah.
That to me, we all know, if we don't know what BNI is certainly a networking event that allows you to grow your business, but there's multiple ways on growing that business, right? It's not just about financials. It's about picking the brain of all these other successful entrepreneurs and paving your own path with that knowledge.
Yeah, learning their mistakes,
Absolutely.
and success stories.
Absolutely. And we've all made them.
Great education. Yeah, I agree. I tell people all the time, I think networking, the ROI of networking is the education.
Agreed.
Before the finances.
Agreed.
Because if you get the right education, the finances will come. So when it comes to the services you provide, how far does you mentioned multiple states, so you can do this anywhere? Or just
No, I
Florida?
speak in multiple states. I've done outreach in multiple locations. I have a client that travels around the country, does motivational speaking, personal growth, and I can talk in general terms anywhere in the state. But when it comes to actual practice, I'm licensed in Florida, and my partner is licensed in Florida and Puerto Rico. So that's where we can practice.
Gotcha. So, what is the difference in your practice between Florida and Puerto Rico?
Very. I am not licensed in Puerto Rico. My partner is, and it's night and day as far as the legal structure, the way it is in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So, we also have co-counsel down there. when we do have matters that we work, we
Mhm.
made sure that we have local counsel to work with us to make sure that we do everything right. Mhm.
What made you want to extend out to Puerto Rico?
Well, you know, we have a lot of clients that travel back and forth
Sure.
from Puerto Rico and Florida. Florida is a very popular destination for native Puerto Ricans, so that's an easy connection. Not to mention, my partner went to school there.
Hmm.
He studied. He actually got his law degree from Puerto Rico. He got licensed in Puerto Rico, and he's also licensed here. So it just makes a great connection. But I wanted to add something else. One other practice area that I really haven't shared with you.
Mm.
So we serve as consultants to federal agencies when they suspect that there's fraud going on internally.
Mm.
So that's
So
another.
you're still working in there a
I'm
little
still
bit,
working
still
in there.
dabbling.
I'm working in as a hired gun. I come in and they say, "Hey, we have reason to believe that this occurred. Can you verify and confirm?" And I give you an example. We're working with a particular federal agency right now. Well, quasi federal agency. They're a state agency funded by the federal government. They're in a different state, and they hired us. They heard me speak about a year ago at some event, and then when uh, uh, allegations of theft occurred, they reached out. So we've done the investigation, and sure enough, we can pretty much corroborate that there was in fact a theft. So now we're facilitating the referral to law enforcement, to federal law enforcement, because
Mm.
we can speak the language.
Hmm.
They've hired us to do that. So we tend to get a few of those a year. They
Hmm.
tend to take quite a bit of time,
Hmm.
but we certainly have kept our, we've kept our investigative juices going with that.
So in our last episode, we talked about how a business truly grows through consistency.
Hmm.
And the one thing I've always felt from you is this consistency. And I think that's how you're ultimately growing your business is, you're not doing crazy aggressive marketing stuff.
No.
Not yet, but as an attorney, it's hard to, you know?
Yeah.
So what would you say is, the consistent thing you try to bring to the table to consistently grow your business? I mean, from my standpoint,
Right.
it's once someone has a conversation with you, they feel comfortable. And so you keep them comfortable, right? And that naturally just makes them want to bring you up in conversations. That
Right.
makes the word of mouth go crazy in that
Right.
situation. So, what has been your success in growing your business?
I think the success has been so far, and listen, we're always chasing consistency,
Sure.
right? That's the one thing that I was just talking to the folks from the agency that are still there. They asked me, that's the one thing we're all chasing is
Hmm.
consistency all the time. That
Hmm.
takes a lot of work. But I think knowing our roles, for my partner and I, we know our roles. He's more administrative. I'm more the person that's out there networking and meeting folks and doing the speaking engagements and what have you. So we know our roles. We know that uh, we both have to produce. We know that, but at the same time, we also have our preferences.
Hmm.
He prefers to be on the admin side. I prefer to be on the outside, speaking to folks. That's kind of what I did in the government. So, and that's what he did in the government as well. So it worked out perfectly. And just knowing our roles and having a really good understanding of our strengths and weaknesses and how we back each other up. So as we succeed, we do it together. If we start fighting each other, then we're going to sink like a rock all the way to the bottom. So we've had a great partnership. We've known each other for a long time before, while we were in the government. I was actually a supervisor at one point when I moved down from Washington to here, and then we started talking about being partners. So having that level of trust with my partner, and then being able to flourish each other's strengths and help with each other's weaknesses, I think that's been our best strength and success.
If you were to give like a main message to prospects or clients right now about what your brand represents,
Mm-hmm.
what would you put it at?
I think, something that I hear a lot from folks is like, well, I've never really thought about an estate plan because that's for rich people.
Mm.
And that's the furthest from the truth. what I would say to folks is, what does it hurt to have a 30-minute conversation with somebody, right? No obligations, just have a conversation, and then you figure out, now that you've been properly informed, now you decide whether you want to do it or not, right? Because a lot of folks, we tend to get our information from maybe some unreliable sources. Well, talk to somebody who's in the industry and who's not going to put any pressure on you, and then you make that decision for yourself if it's something you want to do or not.
I like that. Fernando, thanks for joining our podcast today, man.
My pleasure.
Best of luck.
My pleasure. Likewise to you.
Keep doing what you're doing, man. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Listen, if this is your first time listening, or maybe it's not your first time listening to this podcast, make sure you subscribe for more great content down the road. We're constantly talking with new professionals and business owners, and learning from others is the best way to gain knowledge and ideas to grow your business. Our episodes are bi-weekly, so be sure to subscribe and get notified on the next one. See you soon.